Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of The Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 9 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs. The 5 main articles are as follows. In the first article, we will read about the various issues revolving around India's pharmaceutical sector and the steps taken by CDSCO. Then in the second article, we will read about how to optimize India's hydropower sector in the wake of rising electricity demand, followed by the third article where we will inquire about the interesting cosmic phenomena such as solar storm and auroras. Then in the fourth article, we will read about the recent court ruling related to the Provident Fund benefits. And finally, in the fifth article, we will read about the rules on contesting seats in the Lok Sabha elections. Towards the end, there will be news snippets especially curated to help you excel in the upcoming prelims examination, so stay tuned. The Central Drug Standard Control Organization has withdrawn the powers which it has delegated to the state's licensing authorities to issue non-object certification for the manufacturing of unapproved, banned or any new drugs for the export purposes. Thus, these steps which has been taken to streamline the pharmaceutical sector forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the larger theme of government policies and interventions. These recent announcements regulating the export of drugs has come at the backdrop when India is facing severe scrutiny because of the allegation for supplying substandard drugs which has caused health concerns across the countries. So before we dwell into the issues revolving around pharmaceutical sector, let's first try to understand its importance for India's economy. Well, India is considered as the global pharmacy of the world. The reason because of its immense contribution to the global health sector. The number speaks for themselves because India is currently the third largest worldwide producer of the drugs by the volume, exporting to more than 200 countries, which constitutes 20% of the global supply, where we meet the demand of 50% of Africa's drug requirement, 40% of USA's demand and 25% of all medicine procured by United Kingdom. At the same time, we produce 62% of the global demand for vaccine. And India is the leading supplier of vaccines such as for diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus, BCG which is used to prevent tuberculosis and measles. Also, as per the essential immunization schedule, 70% of all World Health Organization vaccines are secured from India. Thus, the market valuation of this pharma industry has actually reached to $50 billion in 2023. Keep this in mind that 50% of this production actually goes to export, thus immensely contributing to our positive balance of payment. Similarly, the industry is expected to further grow to $65 billion by the year of 2024 itself, and it will double down to $130 billion by the year of 2030. As you guys can see from the pie chart, the drug formulations and biological forms the majority of the component of our export share in 2023. However, these achievements are mired with various issues which has actually dented the India's image as the global pharmacy of the world. What are the issues? The first is the obvious, the contaminated medicine and the substandard drugs. For example, back in 2020, 12 children in Jammu died because they consumed a medicine which had high concentration of diethylene glycol, thus ultimately leading to their kidney poisoning. Also, such substandard medicine brought humiliation for our country at global front when back in 2022, the World Health Organization released a medical product alert for an Indian pharmaceutical company manufactured cough syrup, which led to the death of 66 children in the West African nation of Gambia. Now, a curious mind may wonder that what are the reasons for manufacturing and export of such contaminated and substandard drugs? Keep this in mind that in India, we have more than 10,000 pharma companies, and majority of them falls in the category of small and micro companies. So, if there is an essential chemical which is required to make the drug that is being manufactured by, let's say, company A, then there is a company B which is actually making the generic drug. There is a company C which is making the tablet in which this drug will be stored, and then there is a company D which is actually responsible for the packaging of this medicine product. Thus, performing the regulation at such several channels is obviously difficult, because the bucket of responsibility can be easily transferred from one company to another in the case of a tragedy which has occurred. Then the state food and drug administrations, they are not mandated to disclose their investigation or inspection report which they perform on manufacturing capacities. Thus, it is obvious that the corruption kicks in, where the life of people are kept at stake for some exchange of some meager amounts, facilitating these manufacturing facilities for easy licensing and to get easy approvals. Then this issue is further compounded because of the large amount of vacancy which exists of the drug inspectors. So, for example, the Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1940, it actually mandates that there shall be one drug inspector per 50 manufacturing facilities and 200 pharmacists. However, the real numbers fall very short of such mandated requirement. For example, Karnataka is currently functioning at the 50% of the sanctioned capacity, while it is as low as 27% for the state of Himachal Pradesh. Then obviously there is the issue of abysmal implementation of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act of 1940, which actually subjects the manufacturer that if the manufacturer is not following the good manufacturing practices which has been laid down by World Health Organization, then it can actually lead to the punishment up to life imprisonment. However, such prosecution, as you guys can see on the table, is very rare and the cases move in the court at a snail's pace. Thus, also there lies an issue of the dual regulation, where the authority to provide licenses to these manufacturing facilities for the export of drug, that lies with the state government. However, the export of good as a subject, it lies in the union list. So, the Ministry of Health and Affairs, the CDSCO, the state health departments, or these drug inspectors, they keep on passing the bucket of responsibility when some tragedy or mishap occurs, such as when the children died in the Gambia because of the consumption of cough syrup, which was actually produced by an Indian manufacturing facility. All this actually provides a window to these manufacturing facilities where they indulge in profiteering, where they start charging high cost for their product, and they actually start manufacturing and selling of unapproved drug such as EDTA disodium or meropenem. So all of this actually leads to various issues of creation of contaminated medicine and substandard drugs. Also, there lies several other issues such as the violation of intellectual property rights, where the Indian companies has actually got into legal disputes with multinational companies for counterfeiting of their product. One such example is of the case of the Swiss company Roche versus the Indian company Cipla of 2014, where the court actually ruled in the favor of the company Roche and Cipla had to pay hefty compensation to this Swiss company. Also, because of these issues, such easy regulations and the substandard control which has been regulated on these pharmaceutical companies, they work on the maximum profit principle. which ultimately leads to the unaffordability of essential drugs. So now pay attention to this news snippet which talks about that how the lowest available prices were actually greater than the estimated generic price for at least 40% of the essential medicines in India. And obviously that leads to the high out-of-pocket expenditure, which according to the World Health Organization, around 100 million people, they fall into the poverty bracket every year because of this high out-of-pocket expenditure for medicines. Then when it comes to the manufacturing of medicines, keep this in mind that India is heavily import dependent on the active pharmaceutical ingredients. What are APIs? APIs are basically that necessary element which provides the therapeutic quality to these generic medicines, such as the valsartan or the atorvastatin, etc. Now, India is almost 80 to 90% reliant on imports from China when it comes to 53 key active pharmaceutical ingredients. And even if you look in the recent years, this dependence has actually grown. So to deal with all these challenges, the government, it has come with several steps. The first is obviously to boost the manufacturing capability, where it has actually allowed for 100% FDI in pharma sector through automatic route when it comes to greenfield projects. Also, the government has launched the production linked incentive scheme for the pharmaceutical sector to promote the indigenous manufacturing of complex generics, biosimilars and value-added medicines, where at least incentive of 5 to 10% will be given to the manufacturers who are producing these medicines in our country. For further increasing our production capacity, the government has launched 27 bulk drug parks, which has very recently in the news, in partnership with the state government, where the central government will provide the state government with grant in aids of at least rupees 1000 crore per park. Also, to promote our research, the National Institute for Pharmaceutical Education and Research is conducting high-end research to create biopharmaceuticals, complex generic drugs and innovation in repurposed drugs, etc. And keep this in mind that all of these categories of drugs are covered under PLI scheme. Further, as we can see from the news, the Central Drug Standard Control Organization has further strengthened the regulation, where in March 2024, it actually cancelled the licenses of 10 pharma companies because they were not following the good manufacturing practices as laid down by World Health Organization. And as per the recent order, now there is the centralization in getting the orders when you are going to manufacture the drugs for the purpose of exports. So now any pharma company shall get the non-objection certificate from the zonal offices of CDSCO and not from the state authorities as it was provided earlier. However, there are certain steps which shall be taken. As the spending on medicine is expected to grow by 9 to 12% by the year of 2030, it is important that we create a central surveillance system by incorporating all the pharmaceutical companies under the Drugs and Cosmetic Acts of 1940. At the same time, these companies shall be encouraged to get good manufacturing practices certification from the World Health Organization. At the same time, to further strengthen the regulatory system, we can create a quality check management and a quality review systems. All these steps are imperative to ensure that we get to the target of boosting our pharmaceutical industry up to $450 billion by 2047, and also to achieve our Sustainable Development Goal 3, which aims to ensure healthy life being for all. On the basis of this discussion, try to practice this particular question, and also as a future bureaucrats, put some suggestions in the comment box that what shall be steps shall be taken to further reform our pharmaceutical sector. We move to the next news. With peak power demand set to touch 200 gigawatt in June 2024, the Ministry of Power aims to avoid the shortfall in the supply by boosting the hydropower. Thus, this optimal utilization of hydropower forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of energy sector, which also comprises of renewable energy. The first question which shall come in your mind is that what is the need for such optimization of hydropower? The first reason is obviously that the power demand which we have, it is significantly increasing over the years. And there are several reasons for that. It is obvious that you are watching this particular video on your tab, to charge which you need the electricity. Then if you are going to watch any other YouTube video, for that purpose also you will be consuming electricity. To charge your phone, to charge your tablets, if you are using an electric vehicles, to charge that. And for all this purpose, because of the digitalization of economy, the power demand has significantly increased. At the same time, because the global warming is taking place, because of the rampant climate change, because of this rising temperature, we need to rely on various cooling devices, such as high use of refrigerators, air conditioners, etc. Thus, in the coming months of June, July, August, the power demand is significantly going to increase. Then, because of the election season as well, there is rampant advertising which is taking place through the use of digital media. That has also led to the increase in the demand of power. And there is also going to be demand from the agriculture sector, which will set up from the month of June, when the Kharif season will begin and the farmers will start using their agricultural pump sets for the irrigation purposes. Thus, as the power demand is increasing, at the same time there is a peak shortfall in the energy generation, which you guys can see from the table. While such peak shortfall was only at 0.69 gigawatt in the year of 2019 to 20, it reached up to 10,000 gigawatt deficit in the year of 2023. And this deficit percentage has increased by 4.5%. Now, while we are facing these issues, there also lies the absence of adequate energy storage infrastructure, where we can actually store the excess power generated by solar, wind, hydropower during the non-peak hours and then actually utilize this energy during the time of peak hours. Then there is obviously the issue of the over-reliance on fossil fuels. Almost 60% of our power generation still comes from the fossil sources, which obviously leads to the generation of carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, which are eventually the global warming gases. Thus, it leads to the cycle of more global warming and more requirement of power. At the same time, on the other hand, the hydropower is considered as a green source of energy because in its production, at least in the initial stages, it does not release any kind of fossil fuel or fossil gases. Then it is obviously the low cost when it comes to the hydropower. Keep this in mind that the initial cost of creating such large dam structures to release hydropower, it requires a lot of amount. But once created, their maintenance can be done at a very low cost. Also, they are flexible and reliable solutions because we can store this water at one point of time when there is, let's say, excess rainfall has occurred or the flood has occurred. So we can actually store this water and utilize it for the later purposes. Thus, hydropower offers us several kind of benefits. Thus, if we look at the status of the hydropower installation in our country, as per the Ministry of Power report, the pumped storage capacity which we currently have is around 47 gigawatt, which ultimately generates almost the 4% of total electricity mix as of 2022. Just look at here, the 53% is being generated by coal. Diesel is generating 0.13, there is lignite. Finally, the other renewables such as solar energy, wind energy, they are contributing to the 24%. Also, look at the other table where it talks about the per capita electricity consumption, and India has obviously one among the highest. Keep this in mind that India is among the world's biggest hydropowers. Currently, we are ranked at 5th and we have overreached Japan. The China is obviously at the first, and it is followed by Brazil, Canada and United States. So it is obvious that we are putting a lot of impetus on hydropower generation. However, there also lies certain issues with the hydropower generation in our country. As per the National Power Portal data release, the target which we had to generate hydropower in this fiscal year of 2024, it was around 12,487 mega units or 12 gigawatt. However, we have shortfall of the target by 14%. Now, out of the total hydropower which we generate, the state generation comprises of 58% of the total. However, we have also witnessed the shortfall in the hydropower generation by these states, up to 19% less power generation than the last year's April 2023. Thus, if we look at the India's hydropower generation, you can see that how it has been actually resulting in the negative growth. Thus, there also lies in the front of us a green energy paradox. What is that? The green energy paradox states that even though because of we are moving to this renewable energy, there is 24% reduction in the emission intensity. Right? So the carbon dioxide emission or the nitrogen oxide emission, that has actually declined because we are moving to these renewable energy sources such as hydropower, solar energy, wind energy. However, there lies the challenge to meet the peak demand. Because let's say if the demand has suddenly increased, right, in the month of June, then we can just burn more fossil fuels such as coal to generate more electricity. However, that is not a possibility when it comes to solar energy or wind energy or hydropower, because they have a uniform limited supply. Correct? So we cannot just significantly increase it in the terms to meet the peak demand. At the same time, the climate change which is taking place, it can actually hamper the hydropower generation. Where you guys can see that in the new normal monsoon, it means that we are witnessing the less rainfall in the terms of annual as well as southwest. Also, the weather anomalies which are driven by the climate change, it can actually cause the scanty rain and snow in the post-monsoon India, and this news was in 2023. So it is obvious that in the pre-monsoon season, we are having the inadequate rainfall, as well as there was very less snowfall in the months of November, December and January. For example, in Gulmarg, Kashmir. So because of all these reasons, it is obvious that the source for hydropower generation, that is actually diminishing. Also keep this in mind that as the glaciers will start warming and melting, for a certain duration of time we will have large supply of water, but that can actually get lessen and lessen in the future. The other issues are such as the environmental and the social cost which this creation of these hydropower dams has. For example, it can lead to large-scale deforestation or massive displacement of places. At the same time, it can actually disrupt the ecological flow of the river. Thus, when the river is actually following its natural course, it actually brings a lot of sediments from the high areas to the lower areas, which actually provide the nourishments and the essential nutrients for the crops to grow. But now all of that will be disrupted. And ultimately, all of these reasons will compound and lead to the loss of aquatic and marine biodiversity. Then there is issue of the fragile Himalayan ecosystem. So it is obvious that most of these hydropower projects, they are based in Himalayas, where we can have frequent issues of flash floods and landslides. For example, one such mishap occurred in the form of Chamoli disaster, which occurred in February 2021, where there was mass flooding in the rivers of Dhauli Ganga and Rishi Ganga, which ultimately led to the closure of that dam. All of this issues, it actually leads to the low profitability of projects, and that is the reason that private companies actually back out of these hydropower projects. For example, because of the closure of Chamoli disaster, it actually led to the closure of that dam, and that led to the loss of rupees 1.6 billion to the Central Electricity Authority. And that is the reason why several private players has actually backed off from such hydropower projects. Then obviously we have the issue of the turbulent relations which we share with the bordering countries such as China. Now, if we look at the topography of Himalayan rivers, it is obvious that India, China and Pakistan in this particular region share a lot of transversing national rivers, right? For example, the Indus River system or the Brahmaputra system which flows from China and comes to India. Now, because they are also putting impetus on hydropower generation, China is creating the world's largest dam on India's Brahmaputra river. And it is obvious that it will actually disrupt the downflow of Brahmaputra river, thus actually disrupting India's hydropower generation. So, to tackle with these issues, there are certain policy measures which we need to adopt. And first of that is to create the run-off river projects. What happens in run-off river project? That the ecological flow of the river is not disrupted by creating a large embankment or structure. Rather, a certain river is flow of river is actually diverted from this penstock. So the river ecological flow is maintained, and there is creation of this penstock which diverts the flow of river a certain portion, and from that we create electricity, thus not hampering the ecological flow of the river. Then we shall also focus on a small hydropower project. A small hydropower project is categorized by generation of up to 25 megawatt of electricity. So because these projects have less capital cost and also they will not require major disruption of the ecology, so the private companies will also be much interested in forming partnership with the government for such small hydropower projects. Then we shall utilize the National Clean Energy Fund, which was created back in 2010 to create and promote infrastructure in northeastern states, UTs of Ladakh and Kashmir, or the state of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. Because the lack of infrastructure in these particular areas, it actually leads to increase in the cost of hydropower projects. So the cost will be come down if we create infrastructure in this particular state through National Clean Energy Fund. Further, the industries has been incorporated under the India Energy Storage Alliance, and they shall be regulated in a way where they can actually contribute to the generation of more hydropower. Also, the report in the news, it gives a very innovative suggestion. It talks about a pump storage hydroelectric plant which shall be generated to increase our storage capacity, where what we do is we have a low elevation reservoir. So during the time when the power demand is very low and we are also generating a lot of renewable energy, we can use that renewable energy to transport the excess water to this high elevation reservoir and keep it at that height. So by that this water is actually accumulating what? A potential energy. And when there will be a high energy demand as coming in the month of June, we will release this water and use its kinetic energy to further generate electricity. Thus, this pump storage hydroelectric plants, they can actually act as a storage battery. Now, with these innovative suggestions, try to solve this practice question and we move forward to the next news. Recently, the biggest solar storm in the last 20 years, it occurred, causing auroras which were observed across India and the world. This interesting cosmic phenomena of solar storm and auroras forms an important component of your GS1 paper under the larger theme of geophysical phenomena. So let's first try to understand what exactly is a solar storm. Well, if we look at the anatomy of the sun, there lies the convection zone, which is obviously the outer portion of the sun. Then just beside this photosphere which we can see, there lies a coronosphere, or the sun's outer atmosphere, which extend the millions of kilometers into the outer space. Here is the photosphere, the visible surface of the sun, which we can see as we have discussed. So from this coronosphere, there releases a coronal mass ejection, which is nothing but a large scale eruption of plasma. Just look at the approximate size of Earth in comparison to the solar flares which are coming out or erupting from the sun's surface. That lead to the release of high amount of magnetic energy, which is categorized into several categories such as the B, C, M and X, X being the largest coronal mass ejection of the highest density, which has actually recently occurred in the time gap of the last 20 years. Now keep this in mind that there is lot of solar activity or burning of this plasma which is being generated by the sun, and that takes in the shape of C11 cycle. This C11 cycle is considered by the scientists or by the NASA that the sun's solar activity is actually getting increased, and that cycle take place in the 11 years time period. Now there are certain things which we have not been able to understand about the sun. For example, the photosphere, which is the outermost region of the sun, that has less temperature than the coronosphere, which is behind it. So there are a lot of things which we have been unable to understand about the sun's anatomy yet. However, for this purpose, the NASA has launched the Living with Star program back in 2010. Since then, it has been monitoring such solar flares and solar storms which takes place. Now, does this coronal mass injection has any impact whatsoever on human lives on Earth? The answer is indeed yes. Because this large amount of plasma eruptions which is being caused by the sun, it actually comes and collides with the Earth's magnetic field. And because of this collision, it can actually lead to several impacts. For example, these solar flare protons, they can actually disrupt the satellites which we have placed at the space, with which we get this GPS monitoring or the weather forecasting which we do. All of that can actually get impacted. This radiation can also affect the avionics and the communication which the planes have with each other, with which we monitor that how many number of planes are in the skies and which plane is taking what route. All of that can be disrupted. At the same time, it can also damage the spacecraft electronics because of the energetic electrons and protons which this magnetic field or magnetic eruptions consist of. So let's say that if India has launched an Aditya L1 mission to study the sun, its functions can get disrupted by this coronal mass injection. Also, the geomagnetically induced current can also disrupt the power systems, right? And it can also have induced effect on the submarine cables. Thus, this potential impacts of solar storm on Earth lies with the disruption of radio waves, GPS navigation, ionospheric pulsations which can occur, electricity grid disruptions. And one major evidence of such impact is the auroras which are created by such solar storms. So what is basically an aurora? As we have discussed that when this solar flare, it travels across the Earth, it gets in the contact with the magnetic field of our Earth. And when this solar wind, it hits the magnetic field, it ultimately leads to the release of electrons and protons, which leads to the ionization of the atmosphere, and that leads to the creation of these various magnificent lights which we can see at the poles. However, this solar storm which occurred, it was so strong that such auroras was also observed at the Honle Observatory in Ladakh, in Kodaikanal Solar Observatory in Tamil Nadu, and Gauri Badanur Observatory in Karnataka. So keep this in mind that such solar flares or auroras which are generated, they are not only observed at the poles, but recently it was observed across the country as well. as down to the latitude of the southern India. Now, on the basis of this information, try to solve this very easy question which appeared in the Prelims 2022 and comment your answers. We move forward to the next news. Karnataka High Court recently struck down the 2008 amendment which permitted the incorporation of foreign workers in the EPF Act of 1952 or the Employees Provident Fund Act of 1952, which forms an important component of your prelims paper under the larger theme of economy, where we are going to try to understand the various kind of EPF benefits which are provided to the foreign workers. But before that, let's first try to understand what exactly is EPF. The Employees Provident Fund consists of Provident Fund, pension scheme as well as insurance scheme, thus providing the organized sector worker with various kind of retirement benefits through several saving schemes. What does this organized sector look like? Well, it is basically any establishment which has minimum of 20 employees, and thus the organization shall be registered with the EPFO to provide provident fund facility to the employees. Now, this EPF is administered by the Employees Provident Fund Organization, which is a statutory body created under the EPF Act of 1952. And it regulates the EPF scheme, the Provident Fund, the pension schemes, and the Deposit Linked Insurance Scheme of 1976. There are several kind of benefits which are provided to the employees under this Provident Fund, such as that there will be an equal contribution which will be made by the employer. There will be an interest which will be offered on the accumulated account. The amount, it can be withdrawn by the employee in the case of unemployment, and there is no tax deduction on any such contribution made by the employee. Now, let's try to understand what are the benefits which had been offered to the international workers under the EPF Act of 1952, which was amended in 2008 to include the international workers or expatriates. So, to understand that, let's take a case study of Tom. Tom, which is an international worker, and it has been employed by an Indian company whose name is Zeri. So when Tom has worked in our country for at least of 6 months, after that he has to contribute 12% of its total salary, and remember it is mandatory, to the EPFO. And the Jerry will also make the equal contribution to the EPFO. So let's say if the salary of Tom monthly is around 1 lakh rupees, then he will be giving 12,000 for its provident fund account, and the Jerry, the employer, will also be giving the same amount. Now, what are the conditions that if the Tom wants that I want to take out my money from the provident fund? There are several conditions which will be applied on the Tom here. The first will be that first he is retired from the service, or he has attained the age of 58 years, or if he retires on the account of permanent incapacity, right, such as physical incapacity or mental incapacity, or if India has signed any social security agreement. What is a social security agreement? Social security agreement is basically a bilateral agreement which India signs with any other country to ensure the social security coverage of workers posted in another country. Keep this in mind that it is a reciprocal arrangement. So let's say first that there was a worker of India named as Vikas. Now Vikas has been posted in Australia by an Indian company, let's say Mahindra. So Mahindra has an office in Australia and they have posted Vikas there. Now Vikas there is earning 1 lakh rupees just like Tom. So now as per the EPFO's requirement, he has to pay 12% back to the Provident Fund contribution. At the same time, what if Australia also has such organization and such requirement, then Vikas will have to pay 12% there as well. So to avoid such double coverage, this social security agreement has been signed, which India has currently signed with 21 countries, not 19 as mentioned in the picture. Now, what are the issues which were arising from this, which led to the High Court quashing this international workers agreement under the EPF? So first, the court said that the aim of the EPF was that the lower salary bracket shall get the retirement benefits. So under this law, what used to happen, that let's say if my salary is less than 15,000 rupees, in that particular case, the company, it becomes mandatory for the company to pay 12% of my salary to the PF contribution if my salary is less than 15,000. However, if my salary is more than 15,000, then it is completely voluntary on the company to pay the contribution or not. Correct? Let's say now the Tom who is working in India. So it is obvious that first of all he will have a very high salary. Over and above that, there is 12% which the Indian employer has to pay to the Tom's contribution of PF as well. So thus the people who have actually high income, such as these international workers, they are getting the advantage of this PF rather than an Indian worker. Because if my salary is above 15,000, it is completely voluntary on my company to whether pay or not. Thus, this disparity, it actually acted as a discrimination violating Article 14 or right to equality as per the Karnataka's High Court. However, the government's argument was that the special benefits which were being provided to the international workers, that was the result of these social security agreements. But the court argued that no, there was no reciprocity in classifying the employees from the non-SSA countries as international workers as well. Thus, now keep this in mind that even if the court has done such ruling, it will not be implemented across the country. So now we will have to look whether the Supreme Court will uphold his decision or not. However, as we have discussed about the provident funds contribution which are provided to the organized sector, and we have looked at the definition of that, try to solve this prelims 2021 question and I hope you will get to the answer. We move forward to the next news. As 18th Lok Sabha elections are underway, several politicians has chose to contest for multiple seats, thus bringing the rules on contesting seats in limelight, which we are going to further analyze under this prelim sections of polity. So let's first try to understand what used to happen pre-1996. Before pre-1996, let's say if I am contesting in Lok Sabha election, I can contest from as many seats as I want across the country. However, in 1996, there was a reform which was implemented by the then H.D. Devigowda government, which implemented the reforms which were suggested by the Dinesh Goswami committee, which was formed in the year of 1990, where it amended the Representation of People Act of 1951 and added a subsection of 33(7). where it said that now as a contestant I can contest from the maximum 2 seats, and the section 70 of the same act says that candidate can hold only 1 seat at a time. So let's say that if I contest from Wayanad in Kerala and then Amethi in Raebareli, and if I win both, which looks very highly unlikely, then I will just get to choose that I will represent only 1 seat in the parliament. The 1 seat will lie vacant. Now what will happen with this vacant seat? There will take a by-election. So it is obvious that the whole election machinery which was involved to conduct this Lok Sabha election, the whole amount of expenditure which went to conduct this election, that will have to be repeated, and that creates a big issue on Election Commission of India. Thus, the Election Commission of India along with the Law Commission, both of them have proposed that the RPA Act should be amended to allow only one person to contest from only 1 seat. Keep this in mind that to contest in Lok Sabha election, I shall be a valid voter in any constituency across India. So let's say if I am fighting a state legislative assembly election, in that case I shall become the voter of that state only. However, if I am contesting for the election of Lok Sabha, I can become a voter in any constituency across the country. However, there lies exemption, there are 2 states and 1 union territory. 2 states such as Assam and Sikkim and 1 union territory of Lakshadweep, where if I have to contest elections in this particular state, then I shall be the member of that particular state only. Also, now we are going to further inquire about the various qualifications and disqualifications and the reforms which the Election Commission of India has taken. So what are the qualifications if I want to contest in Lok Sabha election? First and foremost, my minimum age shall be 25 years. If I am contesting for Rajya Sabha election, it will become 30 years. Then it is obvious that there is no minimum educational qualification. That is why our parliament is graced by such intelligent luminaries. Then I shall be registered as a voter in any constituency across the India, and I shall not be convicted for any offence which is punishable for more than 2 years. Keep this in mind that if I have become convicted and I am out of bail and the bail is pending in the court for a review, even then I will be considered as a disqualified. Then there are certain other disqualifications. One is if I hold the office of prophet under the government of India or the government of state, which is provided under Article 102 of the Constitution. However, keep in this mind that the Constitution does not describe the office of prophet. Then if I am of unsound mind, if that has been declared by any competent court, or if I have become undischarged insolvent, which basically means that I have become financially bankrupt and I have taken some loans, so there are chances that I might get involved in corruption, thus I will be declared as disqualified. Also, if I have voluntarily acquired the citizenship of any foreign country such as Canada. Then there are certain reforms which has been taken by the Election Commission of India. What are they? The first is that the party funding, to regulate that, the ECI has decreased the cash donation limit which you can give to any party from 20,000 rupees to 2,000 rupees. Then very recently the Supreme Court scrapped the anonymous contributions which were being done under the electoral bond. The ECI has also banned the cash transportation in the vehicles after sunset, and it is also monitoring the non-scheduled charter flights to regulate cash, liquor and drug movement, which heavily influences the elections in our country. On the basis of this information, try to solve this Prelims 2021 question. And just read the first statement where it says that there is a no law which is restricting the candidate from contesting in one Lok Sabha election from 3 constituencies. Now we know there is a law because the amendment has been made. Section 33 of RPA 1951. The first statement can be removed. So it means that the second statement is obviously correct. Let's come to the third. It says that as per the existing rule, if a candidate contests in one Lok Sabha election from many constituencies, his party will bear the cost of by-election. Obviously not, because the cost of election will obviously be borne by the Election Commission of India. So the answer will be 2 only. With this, we move forward to the next news segment of the day, in which we are going to cover some important news which can help you to eliminate some important statements in the upcoming prelims examination. And the first news talks about that whether the cattle can actually turn into a flu host switching. Let's first try to understand what is flu host switching. The article states that the pigs are called the evolutionary lab for flu host switching because they have the presence of human flu as well as avian flu host cell receptors in their respiratory tract. Now, recently we have observed that how the H5N1 virus has been detected in high concentrations in the milk or in the cattle, which is further impacting the Texas region of USA. So the higher concentration of virus in the milk samples when compared with the respiratory samples strong suggest that H5N1 or avian influenza pathogenesis in the cattle is different from the other mammals. So now just keep 2 important things in your mind. The first is obviously the evolutionary lab for flu host, and who are called that? The pigs. Then the cattle are also emerging as a strong virus receptor and spreader, as we can see from the case of avian influenza. With this, we move forward to the next news where we will talk about the magpies of Himalaya. The magpies who belongs to the Corvidae family. Corvidae family, which are characterized by crows, by ravens, by magpies, the blue jays, the jackdaws, as well as the stellar jaws. Now, as per the article, when we talk about the magpies in the Himalayas, we see different kind of magpies at different altitudes. For example, the gold-billed magpies can be found in the region of 2000 to 3000 meter. The red-billed magpies found up to 1000 to 2000 meter, and the blue magpie we found at the level where the humans live as well. Then there are certain important places for sighting such magpies. First is obviously the Yuksom, Sikkim, and there is this track which goes from Yuksom, Sikkim to the Kanchenjunga near the Goche-La Pass. Also, we can find these magpies in the tropical moist broadleaf forest to the high subalpine forest. Now, as recently the UPSC has started asking questions where they ask about the habits of animals or the activities of animal, keep one interesting fact in mind that these magpies, they build their own nest at branches in the rhododendron trees, which are majorly the tropical trees. The IUCN status of the magpies of Himalayas are least concerned, and the article highlights that how there is important need for sustainable tourism to ensure the protection of magpies. With this, we move forward to the next news, which talks about the Occupational Safety and Health Code. Keep this in mind that 29 labor laws which existed earlier, they were replaced by the 4 labor codes, such as the Codes on Wages, the Industrial Relation Code 2020, the Code on Social Security, and Occupational Safety and Health Code of 2020. The article highlights an important section of this code, that is the Section 18 of Occupational Safety and Health Code, where it provides for a standard on occupational safety and health for several categories of workers, such as the workers who work in factories and mines, who works at dock work, the bidi and cigar workers, and the construction workers. Now, the various trade unions has actually complained that they were not invited in the meeting which is trying to regulate various provisions of this code. Keep this in mind that this code lies as a model code for various states to draw their own laws, and they have not come into force yet. With this information, we move to the last news of the day, where we are going to talk about a very interesting concept of lithium triangle, which has been in the news because the PSU, that is Kabul, it is aiming to acquire lithium blocks in Australia. Keep this in mind that Kabul forms actually a kind of a merger or a joint operation of 3 important PSUs which deals with various mineral acquisition and control, that is NALCO, HCl and MECL. Our focus is going to be on the lithium triangle. The lithium triangle, which comprises of 3 countries, you can learn the mnemonic, that is CAB, that is Chile, Bolivia and Argentina, which comprises of 60% of the world's lithium stocks. However, also keep this in mind that none of this country is the largest producer of lithium. It is rather Australia, which is followed by Chile, the third is China, and then Argentina. Keep this in mind that India, even though we have discovered a lot of lithium reservoirs such as Riasi district in Jammu and Kashmir, however, we are still incapable to produce a lot of lithium, on which we are heavily dependent on import. With this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.